Hello. All right, do I want to be here? I think that's fine. Since I moved so there used to be a monitor here, and now there's a monitor here, and then the one that's here got moved this way because I have a desk, but it's only so big. I'm still getting used to it. The point of this was that this arm to use this mic would basically cover up, just go all the way across the secondary monitor in how my setup used to be. And so my options were try to move this arm over to here, understanding that it would still need to connect via USB to the desktop over here, or perhaps easier, and that has proven to be so, move the secondary monitor to here. I'm still only living that 2-monitor life. I may at some point move to the 3-monitor life. I tried to plug in a third monitor and it did not work. And I'm not totally sure if it was the monitor or if it was my computer's capacity to handle several monitors. So, still living the 2-monitor life. It's mostly fine. The only times when it's really tricky are when I am GMing a game online and we're streaming, especially if I'm doing production, because then that's just too many windows that I want to have large enough to be able to see what's going on and have stuff at a decent size. And that is a little bit difficult with what I have. It makes me wonder how people do like large streams with less than what I have in terms of monitor space. I imagine that some stuff would just have to be very small and they'd get used to it. I suppose I could like take an old iPad and try to like streamline or clean it up in some way that it can access Wi-Fi decently and run okay, and then handle some part of what I'm trying to do to then free up space from over here. I don't know that that's necessarily going to be super viable because the iPad I have is old enough now that it tried to update past its ability to run the OS. And so it's just of an iPad at this point. And so I basically just stopped using it entirely. I got it with the hope that I could do some work on it and that it would be a great platform for reading digital comics. And then I didn't use it a whole lot. And then it got lapped by Apple's planned obsolescence OS update paradigm, where maybe they don't do this anymore, but for that device at least, they said, oh, here's a new update. We know what your hardware is, and it can't handle this update, but here you go. You have to take it. We will eventually force it down this device's tubes. So that's why that iPad doesn't really see use at this point, which is a bummer. I'm trying to be more thoughtful about like various tech acquisitions in terms of like, I don't need this. In practicality, I'm not going to get a lot of use out of this. The third monitor was something that somebody had put out on the street on a not rainy day and said free. And so I grabbed it to see if I could use it. And the answer was apparently no. So this is one of the many places where the fact that I don't actually know that much about hardware, and I know only a little bit more about software, very small amount. So I try to do things and I go, okay, well, I learned some basics of how all of this works. And I try some things and I go, well, that doesn't work. I know 1 to 2 more things that I can try. And then after that, I have to ask friends for help. And I have not had a friend come over and like redo my tech stuff since the start of the pandemic. A friend built the computer that I'm using just before we started locking down. We started having public safety measures put into place for the pandemic in Maryland in that second into third week of March of 2020, and have not had friends over very much since then. and not since, or not until, I don't know, sometime in 2021, honestly, that the first friend who came over had, I believe, been already vaccinated, and we were already vaccinated. But anyway, so I've got various things going on here, trying to make stuff work, trying to figure it out, trying to get used to this new layout where instead of the camera being over here and pointing at me this way, now it's more centered, but not totally centered, and it's a little bit high, because there's this space above me here. So I'm like, it's not especially rule of thirds compatible here. But when I bump the camera, it is not necessarily the best kind of situation. For these craft chats, I have been putting posts up on Patreon, soliciting topics and requests. Not gotten a lot of late. That's understandable. Publishing has just kind of ground to such a slow pace where publishing looks at molasses and goes, so fast, so fierce. Would that I could be like that. And so it leaves a lot of authors feeling kind of adrift. And that's kind of where I've been for a while now as well, especially since even with bivalent booster and, even with that, most places in the US have just completely given up on any COVID mitigations. And so it's like one-sided masking and bivalent boosters against everything. So I haven't been going to conventions. I have a couple of conventions on the books for the rest of the year, one at the end of this month and one in December. Who knows what will happen with the one in December? We could have a spike or a new variant by then. I'm still feeling pretty good, knock on wood, about the one at the end of this month, largely because it's very small. It's like under 1,000 people in a large hotel with a big atrium, and all of their spaces are better ventilated than, like, they're one or two steps more ventilated than like the CDC guidelines. And I did some research about it, MERV, this was something like that, 14, 18, that stuff. It was a while ago. So how are folks doing today? My hope is that we'll just hang out and chat some about writing and gaming and things like that. I kind of scribbled down a couple of things to talk about, but if you have things that you have been chewing on that you want to talk about, that's great. Just let me know. If you've got questions, I will see if there's something that I can maybe help with. And why don't I go ahead and do this? Since it's just me today, and then I can do this, and I can go here, and then I can do this. So you get more of me. Hello, I'm here. It's just me. No video games today. We might talk about video games, but I will not be playing them. I think I'm pretty close. Well, probably another 2 or 3 hours for On Wintermoor to finish that up, because I've been doing lots of side quests and things. But that's been pretty fun. And then on next Wednesday, Potionomics will be out. So there's a good chance that that's what I'll be playing on Wednesday. I could try to do a stream on Monday to catch the excitement, because that's when it comes out, but it's fine. There's so many people who are going to be streaming it. Waiting a couple of days is not going to be a huge deal. I'm not massively chasing numbers like I got to become a pro streamer. I got to get partnered on Twitch. No, I'm doing this because it's fun. It's a way to be social in a more specific and focused way. If some terrible person comes into chat here, I can block them in a way that and make them go away in a way that I can't on Twitter. Because someone comes into my mentions and is terrible, I can block them, but then everybody who follows me may still be seeing them and then has to block them as well. On Twitch, it's more kind of the way that things are structured. I can protect and moderate the space a little bit more effectively than I could in some other situations. Plus, it's a way for me to kind of still speak and be in the world in a particular fashion without having to leave home. And, playing video games and all that kind of stuff is very fun. Doing the game design and campaign design and GMing streams have been really fun. I'll probably keep on doing those, though I may switch some of the stuff that I'm working on. I think the Eberron Morning Shadow campaign probably won't be happening on Start Playing Games because it's a custom thing. I'm not super established over at Start Playing, and I think I'm going to be switching over to trying to get a Light of Xerxes game running. Light of Xerxes being a Spelljammer campaign that's from this, it's in the same set as this Astral Adventurer's Guide. Squid Ship. The Light of Xerxes is supposed to be like really pulpy. It's drawing on touchstones of Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, old kind of planetary romance or space fantasy, space opera serials, which is really fun. I love those touchstones. I love a good space fantasy, as anybody who has read Annihilation Ari would know, or heard me talk about Star Wars ever. So that's scheduled for the start of November. I'm recruiting for that. I hope that I'll be able to get it up and running. We'll see. I know that a lot of people on Start Playing talk about how it took them several weeks or even a couple of months to get going and to fill up their first 1, 2, or 3 games. And so we'll see. If I get another 2 months in and I've just got the Blades in the Dark game that I'm running that started this week, and I may have another player soon. If we fill up there, maybe I'll just run the one thing and that'll be fine. Brings a little bit of money, kind of gets me out into the world in a different way to a certain extent. The upside of pro GMing is that I say the time and then people come to me, and I don't have to chase people for scheduling in the same way as if I were running a game on Speculate or on Arv's channel or even on my own Twitch channel here, chasing people down to do scheduling and going and finding players, and all of that is a lot of work, and much of it is the type of work that is especially tiring for me because of wanting to make everybody happy and not wanting to impose, and when something goes wrong, not wanting to disappoint other people. Like, there's a whole bunch of things, and that in the last couple of years I've had to reckon with those aspects of GMing and like making actual play stuff on the internet that are really hard for me, and needing to communicate about that with the people that I'm doing stuff with. Here specifically, that's, Brandon and Greg for Speculate. Start Playing is handy because I set the time, and if there's demand, the thing happens, and I know when I'm going to be running the thing. And there's it takes other work and stuff like that. I'm not going to say that it doesn't, but the difficulties are different. The things that are challenging are not the same, and that's really handy. One of the things that I noted down for the chat today was basically talking through or sharing some of what I've been doing to try to kind of keep going and be active and get things done as a creator in the pandemic, with like ADHD and executive function challenges, where on bad days, like, I just don't have much make brain go do thing. There were chunks of time when I would try to do bullet journaling, and I think there were chunks of time when I was exercising more often, and that was helping. And I, go to the gym every week because I have a package where I get personal training, and that's very good. But I'm not then also going out to other classes as much because of scheduling or energy or anything like that. And so there's a variety of struggles, and this, as I kind of try to learn more and more about ADHD and awareness and understanding of that gets broader and more nuanced via, advocates and educators on TikTok and Instagram and things like that. And doing seminars and Q&As with stuff like Better Faster Academy, where they talk about like neurodiversity and strengths and all this kind of stuff. Trying to figure out, okay, for my brain, how my life works, how can I get the things that I want to get done? How can I make progress on projects and the things that I'm excited about, and keep track of the things that are important to me, and do so in a way that doesn't just leave me completely burned out at the end of the day, where like I get to 5 p.m. and then I just need to be for like 3 or 4 hours and then go to bed. And, full-time work is tiring. So if I were going back to an office job, maybe I would be just as tired by the end of the day or worse, because, as a creator, I am more in charge of my own schedule in at least some ways. But one thing that I have tried to do that has been, I would say, somewhat successful so far is basically letting the part of my brain that will grab and fixate on something as like a special interest, and to just let that happen, and to go, oh, okay, I'm really excited about figuring out how people write their ads for Start Playing Games and what good copywriting for that looks like, and learn a bunch about how people have been doing pro GMing on this site, and doing the graphic design for the visual part of the ad, and learning about Affinity Photo and using Canva, and just doing all of that. And so I spent several weeks where that was the main thing that I was doing in terms of work. And so I just said, yeah, this is the thing that I'm into. I'm going to let that happen, instead of regarding it as, oh, this is a distraction. Like, this is procrastination, or this is not what I want to be doing. It's like, well, I want to do it. And so I'm going to go ahead and let myself do this thing. I'm going to pursue this interest, at least some. I'm going to go down that rabbit hole a bit and get the satisfaction, or get the dopamine from chasing a special interest, at least some, with the hope that then that will be that chasing of an interest and indulging in it and kind of like really getting into it will be satisfying, validating, fulfilling enough that I'll then have some energy that I can put into something else. So I can spend some time just like going down a rabbit hole with something that's cool and interesting. And then, someday or whatever in the week, I can get up, I can do all my morning stuff. I can get to this computer at, 9:30 or 10, having gotten up, walked Oreo, fed myself, showered, done a lap around the internet or whatever. And okay, now it's time to write, and actually write. And hey, Maldarian, thank you. I am talking about trying to get things done as a person with ADHD in a pandemic. So that may or may not be especially of interest, but I think we're also going to talk generally about like getting things done and how to do the things that you want to do when your brain wants to do other things, the things you want to do when your brain pulls you in other directions. Okay, yeah. So I'd be curious to hear about like how you've been coping with this kind of stuff, or if you've done some of the things that I'm talking about and, they've worked or not worked for you. I'd be very happy to hear about that. So I would let my brain just kind of go and follow stuff that's interesting, and then get started in the morning where I often write a quick dopamine fix. Hi, Deep Alexi. Another thing that I have been trying to your comment is I'd seen some reporting and some anecdotal stuff about, okay, folks with ADHD, we recommend that you try to get up and have a bunch of protein really early in your day, because biochemistry, something, something, something. And for much of the pandemic, my breakfast was either music is a big thing for me. So I will probably come back to that. My breakfast pre-pandemic was often an omelet with eggs and then some combination of onion, garlic, spinach, maybe bell peppers, where I get the protein from the eggs, and then I get some of the good stuff from the veggies, iron from the spinach and other things like that. And during chunks of the time in the pandemic where stuff was especially hard and executive function was not great, and I would have a pan that I would need to clean out to then cook in, and that was just not going to happen in the morning, on top of doing all the other stuff that I needed to do, like feed the dog and give the dog pills and whatever else. I moved to just having English muffins. So the work for English muffin is slice English muffin in half using bread knife. So no worries about cutting myself. Put muffin in toaster and then put on, butter and jam or whatever, which I was using muffins that are high in fiber. So that's good, but it's really, really not much in the way of giving me protein. So we got a blender for making like breakfast shakes. And I've done that a little bit using like the, not like full on whey protein stuff, but like protein shake breakfast things, many of which have been, honestly, they taste terrible. Kayaking sounds great, since you can theoretically be doing that like yourself and a partner, right? Or yourself and a buddy, rather than going and do something in like a big but crowded gym. Yeah, toast is very easy. When you don't have a lot of brain, toast is easy. So I've been trying to move toward more doing shakes. The shakes I'm still kind of getting a handle on in terms of proportions of what stuff I'm putting in other stuff. Like, okay, do I need to get to the point where I'm measuring, this is how much of the shake I'm putting in, this is how much of this frozen fruit I'm putting in, and that kind of stuff, because that's like more work. And what I want is something that will let me get a good chunk of protein in the morning without having to take a lot of brain. What I've done more this week is just Greek yogurt, like a granola type thing. It's just like the vanilla almond granola from Target, and then some honey and a sliced banana. And that's worked pretty well. It's yogurt that if I have a cup of the yogurt, it's about 25 grams of protein. And then there's some more protein in the other stuff. Vanilla extract. Interesting. I do have some of that. I had been using peanut butter to go on the savory side, this like savory and salty side, or adding honey to increase to make them a little bit sweeter. Kind of uneven results, I would say, but I've only made this type of shake like 4 times now. And so I really haven't put in a bunch of reps. It's really loud. And so, I'm making food and it's 8 something or 9 something in the morning and it's loud. And it's even loud to me because I'm right there. So I'm not as much about that. And then there's a lot of cleanup to have to do versus yogurt in bowl, granola in bowl, honey, banana, and then just, eat out of the bowl. I liked having the fresh, just cooked food part of the omelets, but that's tricky. Yeah, right? Because if you're not like exactly measuring in things. But if what I want is like a bunch of protein right away, the yogurt and granola stuff seems to be working the best for me in terms of not that much effort, but it gets the macronutrients that I want more or less in the time that I want. The other thing is that I because of medication, I'm trying to keep my fiber intake really high. And so that then involves having, or what I've been using for fiber, I don't like the taste of hard-boiled eggs, unfortunately. I think that's a very good suggestion that does not work for me. Egg in a cup is not a terrible idea. Let's see, how many? I didn't know that this would go all the way toward becoming like a ADHD life hack and nutrition stream. I guess that's where we are. It's fine as long as y'all are enjoying it. All right, how much protein in an egg? 6 grams. Yeah, so I'm not gonna... It would need to be 3 eggs plus other stuff to get to that, like 30 grams of protein, right? If it's 6 or maybe 7 grams of protein per egg, and that it feels like so much food. Maybe that works. I don't know. Salami, it's a lot of salt. Yeah. So what I've been using to keep my fiber intake high is carb balanced tortillas. It's like from Mission or whatever, some big brand. Protein pancakes. Interesting. I do like pancakes. Would that make pancakes not feel like a special food? I don't know. Oh, right, like the Kodiak brand. I think I tried that once and it felt... I wasn't super into them, but I really only tried it once. Yeah. That might be worth trying again. Let me look at what's their situation here. No, I want give me the nutritional bits. I want to know how many grams of protein in a serving. Like straight up tell me how you work. This is not insufficient. Label info. Here you go. 14 grams of protein in a half cup serving. So I guess that's supposed to be... So if I had a double serving, so if I had 1 cup worth of that, that would be about the amount of protein that I'm looking for. Pancake with peanut butter is not a terrible idea. Meg is allergic to nuts, so therefore a good chunk of time I just didn't have foods with nuts in them at all, because they had to then, like, I wanted to be extra sure to clean them in a way that then didn't like get nut on all the other stuff that we have that would then make Meg sick. I think those precautions were more extensive than is necessary, and Meg informed me as such, which is why the almond granola and things like that. So I love peanut butter, and I just hadn't had peanut butter. Half cup is about 2 pancakes. So a breakfast of like 4 of those pancakes. That's an option. Yeah, thank you for the suggestion. That might be an option, because part of the trick is that having a novelty-seeking brain, but also a liking habits brain, is really tricky, because it's hard to know, okay, we're going to buy groceries on Saturday. It's hard to know on Saturday what my brain is going to be like on the following Tuesday or Thursday, because there's just a range of how well did I sleep? What am I thinking about? A zillion other things. So I think having some flexibility, having a couple of different options is really handy, especially basically a higher executive function version and a lower executive function version, which can also stand in for, I'm not rushed this morning, I am rushed this morning. Whether that's because I have to do something with the dog, or because I have a morning appointment for something like doing consulting or whatever. So if I think the milkshakes are worth continuing to try a few different things, especially because we went out and bought a thing. And so I want to give it a real shot, again, to earlier comment about not wanting to buy hardware that I then don't use. So trying that. having a few different things for getting my morning started with protein. Like the optimal thing would be high protein and high fiber in the morning. I tried for a little while to get avocados and then have like avocados on toast, being a millennial, or have avocados with omelet or other things like that, because I think there's some kind of superfood, avocados they have like a lot of protein. Okay, so avocado, whole medium avocado, 240 calories, 3 grams protein, 10 grams fiber. So it's really the fiber thing. So like high fiber vegetables and fruits. Sure, let's see what else I'm doing here. We're crowdsourcing my diet at this point. How can I eat in a way? Avocado cut in half with Kewpie mayo. I'm not sure. I've definitely seen that word before, but I don't remember. Okay, is a brand? Kewpie mayo, vinegar, MSG. Okay, yeah. I mean, that doesn't suck. That sounds pretty nice. So, pears. I don't really like pears. Strawberries. I'm not a super fan of strawberries raw. Avocado, they mention. Apples. I do like apples. Relatively high in fiber. Yeah, that's not terrible. Raspberries. I like raspberry jam sometimes. Bananas. I have been trying bananas. Carrot's a little hard to snack on unless they're like pre-sliced or whatever, and they're harder to cut than like a banana because they're solid. Beets, not a huge fan. I do have broccoli pretty often. Not a huge fan of artichoke. Brussels sprouts, I like the version of Brussels sprouts that are available now, where they kind of they bred out some of that sourness that they had when I was eating Brussels sprouts like as a kid and teen in the 90s. Lentils are great in a lot of ways, but require cooking. Kidney beans, split peas, not super into either of those. Chickpeas are fine. The trick with chickpeas is that most people are having chickpeas in hummus, and I'm allergic to sesame. So I can't do hummus. And as I discovered, the restaurant Cava, which opened a location right next to Bark Social where we take Oreo, I had gotten them mixed up in my brain with an Italian kind of fast food-ish place called, I think it may be just called Piata. And so Cava does pita with sesame. And so there's sesame in the pita and sesame in all the hummus and everything that's like a variation of hummus. So it's like, oh, actually, I really can't eat much that's here. Maybe one of the food bowls as an option. So I had gotten myself kind of excited about having that restaurant there so I could, go and take Oreo for something and then grab something to be a dinner or like a snack or a breakfast the next day. I think you can make hummus without sesame. It would probably just be some other oil that is fine. So I could use like canola oil or whatever. Let's see, hummus without tahini, sure. Simple hummus without tahini, thewholesomedish.com. Please don't be terrible. So they say beans, cumin, garlic, olive oil, and lemon. That's probably doable, but again, food prep has not been a thing that I've been able to keep up with really well at all. Because while I might technically have the time to do so, I don't always or even often have both the time and the executive function to do that much of extra food prep. Like we've been getting HelloFresh, which is really handy because between the two of us on any given weekday, we probably have enough brain function to get dinner made when all the ingredients are there, the steps are there, most of like we've been moving toward recipes that are a little bit easier. Ideally don't take as many pans, but sometimes we get them ones where we get done with dinner and it feels like we've used every pan in the house. And then doing the dishes is a bunch of work. We've moved toward just like, it's fine. Just running the dishwasher more is fine kinds of mentality, which I used to not be so much of a mind. Was like, oh, I need to save more water. It's like, that's no, I mean, that would be great, but it is important to keep, to be able to keep ourselves going. Thanks for coming by, Trifity Mats. See you around. Yeah, like Deep Black Essay says, if you're doing food prep to save yourself the work later on, you still need the energy and the brain to do the food prep. And really, you need to know that you're going to have brain at particular times so that you can set yourself up to have gotten all the ingredients and have all the dishes ready to do the food prep that you need to. Yeah, and that's right, Yellow Flower. Dishwashers are way more efficient now than they were, 20 years ago. So I don't feel as bad about that. So, yeah, okay. I'm already doing some of the stuff. Oats, popcorn is high fiber. That's interesting. Almonds, I'd been avoiding those because of nut allergy, but I do have them in the granola that I've been getting. Chia seeds, I haven't really ever fucked with chia seeds, even when I lived in a co-op. Coconut, pistachio. Yep, pistachios is, there's a whole company that's like, we're gonna make pistachios super sexy and expensive. Probably because they're very resource intensive to grow, by my understanding. Sweet potatoes, dark chocolate. Yes, I know that. Yeah, because a comfort food for me is pizza, and pizza, lots of carbs, a fair amount of fat for the most part. Not necessarily very much fiber, because most pizza that you get just from the world is not with wheat flour, it's with white flour. And so if I wanted to move my world toward like less processed breads and things, I would love to be able to get all of the fiber I need from stuff other than here is a wheat tortilla on top of already having pizza fairly often. Maybe that doesn't matter as long as I stay fairly active. Like many people, I gained some weight as the pandemic moved on, like got going, because I just wasn't in the world and my mental health was bad. So I would like to be able to, so Meg's allergies, peanuts and basically all other types of tree nuts. So almonds, walnuts, and stuff like that. Ground nuts. Let me look up what actually ground nuts means. Yeah, I don't know about like Bambara or Hausa ground nuts. But peanuts, yes, absolutely allergic to those. So having both, like wanting to both get a lot of protein in my food in the mornings and wanting to have a lot of fiber across time is like, oh, okay, trying to hit two goals in like diet and food planning within the framework of, I think it like, the things that are not actually nuts, like pine nuts are fine because they're different. Grape nuts, I believe, are also different. But yeah, having two requirements for food stuff when I'm trying to then adjust my food situation to be more executive function friendly is very tricky. because I'm trying to keep track of several things, which then kind of has its own energy attention tax. One thing that I think that has definitely been good for me is just having Oreo, because I get downstairs in the morning at 8:30 or something, and he needs to go out. He at least needs to go out and do his dog business. When the weather is better, so like nice but not too hot, I try to have the morning walk with Oreo be closer to like 45 minutes to an hour, like a lot more of activity for him in the morning and some activity for me, just to kind of get my brain going. I will usually be listening to a podcast of some sort, whether that's an actual play or maybe various interview shows and things like that. I've moved away for the most part from listening to like politics and news podcasts in the morning, so as to not like start my day off with stuff that gets me angry about how the world is. Yeah. Having Oreo is good, because I know that he is dependent on us for all the important things in his life. And so I have to be able to function for him. I know that he needs exercise, so I'm going to take him out. Taking him out also gets me exercise. In the couple of years before we got Oreo, Meg was working at an office and I was working from home, because this was when I was still doing stuff with Angry Robot. And I would go sometimes 2 or 3 days without leaving the house, because I would just work from home. Meg would get home. We would do stuff at home. Parking in our neighborhood is a nightmare, so we didn't often go drive to different things in the afternoon or evening, because then we'd get home at 8 or 9 p.m. and it'd be impossible to find parking closer than a 15-minute walk away. Having Oreo, I'm out of the house all the time. It's raining. I still need to take him out. He's miserable, but I need for him to at least go into the world to do the essential dog business and then come home. So that's been very handy. And I have a treadmill right over here, which I try to use as much as I can, just to get up to my, the kind of 10,000 steps a day target. Sometimes I'll try to, get above that in terms of like more extensive exercise on top of the personal training that I do, which is really good. I'm just checking to see if this thing in Discord is something I need to deal with right now. Da-da-da. It's not. Definitely right to that. Yeah, so something to get out of the house I think is really good. I remember this was even pre-pandemic, people talking about like it's important for human beings to do stuff that will let them basically get some sunlight on their skin, or replace that with X, Y, and Z vitamins. So, I use sunscreen a lot more than I used to, especially in the summer. I just kind of check the UV levels in my forecasting app. And anytime the UV rating is above 1, I put on sunscreen when I'm taking Oreo out and I know that I'm going to be out in the world for more than 10 minutes at a time and stuff like that. So I've got a few different things that I have been combining to try to push my life in the kind of directions that I want to, in terms of being able to be more functional and more healthy. But yeah, like I think one big upside of how people have responded to the pandemic is that a lot of people have learned that they can work from home, and that for a lot of people that is a net positive in terms of like gas expenditures or some other things. But for other people, like it's good to be able to get out of the house, or it's good to see other humans in person. Social monkey. Pre-pandemic, and especially when I was working Angry Robot, is like on Wednesdays when we still had our comic book shop in the neighborhood, I would go out and I would get my new comics I would chat with the owner for, 5, 10, 15 minutes, getting my comics. And then I would go next door or 2 doors down, and I would have lunch at a Mexican place that I like. And, get some tacos, have a soda, read my comics, have a nice lunch out, just be in the world. I'm not doing that in the pandemic. I have eaten inside a restaurant that was actually inside twice, I think, since the start of the pandemic. And one of them was during hot vax summer, that chunk of time that for me was only like 6 weeks between Meg and I are both fully vaccinated with the original set of vaccinations. Between that and when was that Delta wave, whatever variant came along and kind of pushed us back in terms of pandemic recovery in the US, where we were always behind a lot of other places because of really mediocre public health responses. And then one other time was, I don't know, something else. Yeah, I definitely feel like I'm not as reliant on being in the world and seeing people, D-Black say. But having already been mostly an inside person who didn't get out very much before the pandemic, that difference from not very much to basically zero was very, very notable to me and made a big impact. I think part of it was that my schedule pre-pandemic was I would work at home. I would sometimes see people locally. I live with my spouse. We have a dog. I would, sometimes chat with people in the neighborhood or whatever. But then 5 to 7 times a year, maybe sometimes more, I would go and fly somewhere for a week. I'd fly out to a convention and I would get just all of the social interaction. I'm in a big room. There's thousands of people in this room. I'm hand selling books. I'm meeting people. I'm at a Comic-Con. I'm doing panels. I'm talking with colleagues. We're hanging out late in the bar and talking about the industry. So I get just big concentrated chunks of social interaction several times a year. And then all of those just went away entirely. And I was doing more stuff online conventions and things like that, but that's not enough. And so this summer, I went out to a local game store several times because they have outdoor play space on the eastern side of the building, of a kind of north-south building, north-south street. So as the sun is setting, we're in shade, which is really handy for the summer, especially in Baltimore, where it's like, oh, okay, it's really humid, but we're not getting direct sunlight. And so it's not as hot that way. So I got to do some of that, but a lot of the people there, they were happy to be inside unmasked and play games. And so I would have to be like, hey, can we play outside, please? And sometimes I could make that work and sometimes I couldn't. And then, I got kind of out of the habit of going because of a variety of things and like schedule stuff for me. And so I'm kind of out of the habit of doing that now. I want to get there a couple more times before it's like full winter here. But that may also not happen if the Thursday D&D game that I have scheduled for start playing actually gets up and running, because then I'll just be at home doing this, or I'll be there. I'll be able to play one short thing that runs from like 6 to 7, and then I'll have to race home, which is maybe not optimal. Yeah, I did not do Gen Con this year. In retrospect, I probably could have and felt okay about it. Part of the trick for me was just that I've so not been doing events and I don't have to be in the world, that the biggest, busiest inside spaces I've been in are grocery stores. And when I'm in a grocery store or like a Target and it's fairly crowded and almost no one is wearing masks, it makes me very uncomfortable. And so the idea of okay, well, for Gen Con, it's going to be that times 100 in like the dealer hall. Plus like all of the stuff dealing with going through airports, if the airport and the airlines don't have mask mandates. I think Gen Con overall seemed to have done a really good job in terms of like actually requiring vaccination and masks, and like having people need to get the wrist things to prove that they were that they actually had shown proof of vaccination. Because I talked with Brandon and Greg, who were both at Gen Con, and other people who were there, and it seemed like overall that went pretty well. That gave me a little bit more confidence that maybe I can go to PAX Unplugged in December. Those are run by different organizations. My understanding is that the PAX East in Boston, maybe they were not as good at enforcing masking there, so maybe that's not as great. But I have the reservations to go to PAX with the hope that there will not be, a spike or a new variant or something. Yeah. Wow. COVID twice because of daycare. Yeah. Even in rural Saskatchewan. Yeah, that sucks. I'm really sorry, Sanguine Hayes. Yeah, because getting COVID, like, I know a fair number of people who have gotten it and had a very mild ride. I've known people who had a very bad time, and I've known people who had a varying amount of time and then they've just been sick for a year or more since, in terms of like long COVID, post-viral syndrome. The long COVID thing is, I would say 80 to 85% of my reticence about going and doing things, because at the, now having been vaccinated and boosted, I think the chances of Meg or I, if we got COVID, being hospitalized are very, very low. But especially with some of the Delta stuff, every time you got infected, you were more likely to become reinfected fairly quickly. And if every time you get infected, you're rolling the dice on like a 15 to 30% chance of like post-viral substantial like symptoms, because it seems like long COVID is most accurately described as a syndrome where there's a bunch of different things, bad things that can happen. As a gamer, I know how not a 30% chance of a bad thing happening is a lot, especially if you have to roll multiple times in a year. Yeah, even 15% is a lot. I remember when, like in March and April, when, most places that I know were really first having to cope with COVID. This is March and April of 2020. People talking about like, yeah, gamers know how often a 1 in 20 bad thing will happen, or even a 1 in like a 1 in 50. Like, oh, okay, how often do you roll 0-1 on percentile dice? For folks who have played a percentile game, like, oh yeah, that's not never. It's really not never. I'm really glad that you have like consistent access to free PCR testing, DL Flower. That's really great. I saw someone say, I think on Twitter, if you get COVID, get yourself a PCR test so you have an official record of having gotten COVID, if you need to then be able to point to that for like medical accommodations later on. I don't know that came from a healthcare provider, but it stuck out in my mind because I know there's been chunks of time when people had a really hard time trying to get PCR tests. Yeah, like, and as DeBlack essay says, Gen Con gets like messy and kind of stinky pre-pandemic. So I feel like people mostly did a pretty good job this year, and that's really, really good. I would love if enough people can get the bivalent boosters and we have enough stuff with Paxlovid and things where 2023 is just like genuinely more like how 2019 was than like how 2021 or 2022 was. I want that. It's not that I don't want all of these things in terms of like want to be able to go to do a bunch of different stuff. It's about, comfort, and also it's about wanting to minimize this, like, minimize spread and risk to other people, right? Because there are disabled and immunocompromised people who have not been in the world even as much as I have, and I have not been in the world very much, because they're way extra at risk, and they're more dependent on grocery delivery and a lot of these other things, where the ability for folks who are immunocompromised to go to conventions is basically going to be zero until COVID is way, way, way less of a thing. And I know that's up to them and their kind of their individual health situation, but part of how my brain and heart works is, okay, and do I feel good about how what I'm doing how do I feel about what I'm doing and how it impacts other people who are more vulnerable? So, the stuff that I've gone out to do is I go to a game store and I hang out outside. I'm inside for like 5 or 10 minutes at a time with a KN mask on to like order food or buy something from the store. I go to Bark Social, which is an outdoor like bar bistro where there are dogs. I've not gone to the movie theater. Like, I've just not gone to much in the way of indoor stuff. And I may continue to not do that even through this winter. This is really only viable because of like Meg's job situation. And like, she has to accept more risk than I do because of working in an office and stuff like that. And so I'm also keeping her COVID situation in mind, in terms of like, oh, she's taking on more risk to make the money that lets us live. Which is all, it's like, that's all just a bunch of different things to have to keep track of. So keeping track of all of this on top of the like mental and emotional strain of knowing what's the huge impact on lots of other people, from medical professionals to teachers and so on and so forth, and all the people who've gotten sick and died. Like gas station, all that kind of stuff that has to get kind of factored into how you're seeing the world. So not getting to see people in person safely, or avoiding it for kind of public safety, and all of these things. So there's just so many layers of stuff that I feel like I've been trying to keep track of or keep a handle on, that it is then really taxing. And so it makes the stuff that maybe wasn't as evidently or as obviously difficult for me with regards to like ADHD pre-pandemic, it makes all that stuff really obvious. Or the kind of floor that I had maintained just kind of went, and so my floor is a lot lower. And then all of that impacts my writing. So I've got a manuscript that's with my agent. I'm waiting to hear back on that. I will want to try to do revisions there. I know that I have a harder time getting the energy to do revisions or to revise at a good pace during winter anyway. So I want to try and get that done as early into the winter as possible, because then maybe it's ready to go and go on submission into the world. I've got another novel that I have started but kind of stalled out on because I was having difficulty kind of mustering the energy and focus to write on a regular basis. And so I'd been working on the Genrenauts game and working on stuff for Speculate and working on the pro GMing stuff, and just kind of writing following the paths of least resistance in terms of like creative and many hat wearing author work for several months while stuff was really especially hard. And all this is kind of stuff like my co-hosts are also dealing with pandemic, and like Greg has a family and is teaching out of the house, and Brandon is, also doing stuff with family, and like, oh yeah, then their washing machine breaks, and like the extra costs of trying to get stuff to Trinidad and uncertainty that goes there, and differences in like access to like, Brandon wasn't able to get vaccines until way later after, Greg and I were in the US, and having people that I care about in different places in the world, and everybody dealing with pandemic related or pandemic exacerbated stuff in their own way, and trying to like support swap enough to keep people going. It's just a lot. And being able to stream here and getting to chat with people and meet some new people has been really great, and I'm very grateful for that. But even knowing that my worth is not based on my productivity, and that I don't have to create great works, capital G, capital W, for my life to have been worth something, I do want to do more things than I feel like I have been able to do. Just like doing creative stuff that I like, not expecting that it will make me money. Like, I do not expect Speculate to become Critical Role. I don't even expect it to become Friends at the Table, where like Critical Role is millions and millions of dollars, and Friends at the Table has a strong Patreon, but that money is split 8 ways. But I just want to like play role-playing games and put them into the world more than I have been able to, because scheduling is really hard and all that kind of stuff. So I've got where I am, kind of up and down where that has been. I remember what it was like, how much stuff I was doing in 2019 going into 2020. And if I go, okay, well, I used to do this much, and now I can do, well, let's see. I used to do this much, and now I'm doing this much. Like, honestly, getting to here, like 40%, from like 40% increase, or 40% of the way towards this would be great. And I think my pandemic low was like under this desk. And so I've definitely made some recovery since then, but I would like to be able to do more. I would love to be able to like write a novel a year and do several streaming shows, do stuff for Patreon, continue like co-running Bag of Giving, or do several shows with Speculate and things like that. And adding the pro GMing is something where I know that it may not end up being worth doing on the long term, where what I might do is I might run this Blades in the Dark game that started, have a good time with those folks, make some, money to help pay with utility bills, and then I might decide to not do that more. I might decide, okay, well, I ran this one campaign and we had a really good time and I'm glad to have done it, but I'm not then going to go and start playing games and list another one, or maybe I'm not going to try to scale up to running 2 or 3 games a week. And part of that is that most of the time that people want to be playing games where they're willing to pay for it it's people in the US in their evening time. So it's basically 7 p.m. through 2 a.m. my time, because West Coast folks are starting later. So those are evenings. I already do some stuff on evenings. Some of that's stuff with Meg that I don't want to not be able to do. And some of it is like streamed games. So I'm not going to run something on Fridays because Fridays is when we do Valorword. I'm probably not going to run something on Sunday nights because Sunday nights is when we do Fractal Spire. But both of those games are somewhat infrequent. And so it's not like I'm getting to do those things every single week, because we're just not in a place where either of those shows are able to run weekly. But they do kind of foreclose those times. And I think if I could offer games at any time of day and know that they would fill, I would probably be running stuff in the afternoons Eastern time. I would do my writing in the morning. I would do lunch, take care of Oreo or whatever. And then I would run a 2.5 to 3 hour game in the afternoon, once, twice, 3 times a week. And I would leave my evenings open. And I would treat it as like, oh yeah, right. I don't know that I appreciated, even kind of in my late 20s, how much easier it was to play TTRPGs in Bloomington and to do so when I was a teenager, like when I was in high school or college, than it is at this point. And like now we have Zoom and we have Roll20 and we have all these digital tools, and it's great because, you know, I play the Strange Friends group. We are in, so there's 2 folks in the USA, in Baltimore and in, I'm trying to remember, like Valerie's moved back and forth in Georgia. Then we have a player in Canada. We have a player in Trinidad. We have a player in Japan. 15 years ago, would have been astonishingly difficult to do that, let alone trying to stream. And the Strange Friends have become very good friends over the course of the pandemic as we started playing Blaze in the Dark together, and then like became friends not just because we were playing in a game together. And so that has been fantastic. But I still love playing in person, and that's been very difficult. I could do in-person stuff at the game store, but it is more fun for me to play TTRPGs with people that I already know, and making new friends as an adult is very difficult because lots of people have demands on their time. And so it's hard to spend as much time with people that you are getting to know, even if you really like them, even if you would really like to spend time with those folks, because again, we live in a neighborhood where parking is garbage. So if a friend who lives a 25-minute drive away, if I want to have them over, we have to figure out their parking, and then whatever parking situation is like at home. And do they have like family that they're also having to like worry about, or are they also a writer, and because they have a day job for, you know, financial stability, and then they write in the evenings, are they needing that time to write at home? And ultimately the problem is capitalism. And this is where I remind everyone that I got emotes. If we had universal basic income, a stronger caretaker economy framework, like public service caretaker work that is well compensated and like structural support, so that, you know, folks could have caretakers during the day to do work, or you could have healthcare to not have to do a day job because you need the healthcare from the day job and all that kind of stuff. So doing the stream will not make universal healthcare happen, but I think it is good to return to, okay, what the underlying problem here is, insert thing. It's probably capitalism or some form of identity-based oppression. It's racism, white supremacy, misogyny, transphobia, homophobia, that kind of stuff, because those tend to they pull lots of other things in to serve their agenda, and then inflict harm broadly and create restrictive systems, is the short way that I will talk about that. And yeah, just universal healthcare, not even universal public healthcare, not even like, if we had Germany's system, it would be much better. If we had Canada's system, it would be much better. If we had probably even the current UK healthcare system, where the Tories have been trying to tear NHS apart. People are like, oh, blah, 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 you have to wait so long, you know, for healthcare in those socialist nations. Every U.S. person or former U.S. person I know who lives in Canada or who has moved to Canada says that the Canadian system is just better. The only differences are like very specific edge cases. And what I'm focused on is medical bankruptcy. It is people not being able to get treatment for like cancer or chronic problems. And so their quality of life is just diminished because they're not able to get healthcare interventions earlier in the process of something like a degenerative disease. And so, richest country in the world, and our healthcare is just shit. And we are killing ourselves working long hours to be able to afford ever more expensive, lower quality stuff, not being able to buy houses because of companies like slurping up all of the housing to then sell us back or to demolish and turn into something that's worse. All of this crap. And it doesn't have to be like this. It's also important to remember that a lot of these things that make our lives shitty are someone's work on purpose because it benefits them. Not, well, life is just bad. Oh, this is just how the world is. Yeah. We're the richest country in the world, but so much of that money does not make the everyday life of people better. We're at the point where I think some tiny percentage of people have as much money as more than half the country. And it's just monstrous. I saw the reporting today about climate activists who threw tomato soup on a Van Gogh. Van Gogh's in a glass case, and it's okay, you're in London, so so you're climate activists in London. There's so many different things you could do, but in the U.S., a lot of direct action activism would just get you shot in the U.S. and maybe even in London, depending on where you were going. And so a lot of those tools for directly addressing material concerns are difficult and not things that can be talked about on the internet. I would encourage people, as I have before, to read late 19th and 20th century labor history and think about how long into the history of American labor action the NLRB was formed and what people had to do before that. Yeah, the wealthiest people in the world are so wealthy it is almost impossible to comprehend. And even if a lot of that wealth is because people believe they are wealthy, it still keeps them so far apart from the concerns of almost everybody that we have lots of problems, because there seems to be sufficient anecdotal and research intelligence, research data that if you are rich enough, you just stop seeing other people as people, or you stop caring. And so that's a problem. We should probably do something about it. Ideally, it would be something that doesn't involve people having to die. Oh yeah, we can lay a lot of that at Reagan's feet. I agree. Reagan and his folks, and unfortunately, Bill Clinton did not help as much as he maybe could have. And so the Democrats in the 90s made the bet that if they tacked hard enough to the right, they could become diet evil and be preferable. And it's only in the last 6 years that there's really been enough of a push against that in institutional frameworks that we're swinging in a different direction. So that became a much longer diatribe and digression than expected, but honestly, should we have expected it from me? Probably yes. I am who I am. This used to be me talking about coping with ADHD. So we've now gone in a long direction. It was lovely. You all are wonderful. I'm going to come back around. I have one other topic that I prepared, but first I will ask y'all if there is stuff that you want to hear about with regards to writing science fiction and fantasy, or writing fiction more broadly, questions about how the publishing industry works, or topics about TTRPGs, because I have one thing about TTRPGs that I took a very tiny amount of notes on and I have some thoughts on. But otherwise, I would love to hear from y'all and put your topic first. And then we'll probably keep going for another, 20 to 40 minutes. Meg is due home pretty soon. But she is probably going to just, want to chill out from the week for a while. So we can keep hanging out. Thank you, Sanguine Hayes. I appreciate it. For folks who weren't around on Wednesday, I got emotes. So we have a robot thumbs up. We have a robot solidarity or fight the power. We have, I need to maximize. We have a Oreo butt waggle with his wagging tail, which is beautiful. And then we have subscriber badges. Right now, I only have, there's basically one badge that I have unlocked. My account will unlock another badge later this year because I've been streaming now for just about a year, which is pretty fun. I streamed a little bit on Twitch 5 or 6 years ago, so it's not actually my 1 year streaming anniversary, but we're at more or less 1 year of me getting back into streaming and streaming consistently. So that is pretty fun and something to celebrate. I will have to figure out what particular thing to do. Potionomics comes out on Monday, so maybe this next week's Wednesday stream I can do something extra if I remember. That might just be giving away books or something. But any excuse to celebrate is fun, and I fully support taking the opportunities that you can to celebrate and talk about fun things and be grateful, especially while the world is very, very difficult. Because something that I have not been able to do basically at all this year is muster the time and energy on top of my writing and creative projects to do canvassing for the midterms. In Maryland, we have a gubernatorial race, which is very important. It seems like the Democrat is in a very good position to win, but I did canvassing for the Democratic gubernatorial candidate 4 years ago, and he was very confident that he was going to win and did not. I think it's a different story here because the GOP candidate is so Trumpy, is so far right, that a fairly moderate Democrat is going to have an easier time maintaining the base, maintaining a majority compared to when Larry Hogan was running for re-election, and I saw just so many signs that were Democrats for Hogan. It's oh, okay, so you're a conservative Democrat. You really like tax breaks for businesses. You want the Maryland state and local tax rates to be way lower, but you're not a homophobe. You're not super racist. And so you're going to get Larry Hogan reelected. And that's what happened. Cox versus Moore, the lines are not drawn in the same way. Wes Moore is a business person. Wes Moore is super, super charismatic, has a great life story. And Cox is, by all accounts, just terrifyingly bad. And so I hope that will not be as much of a problem. But in 2018, I put a lot of time into canvassing. Yeah. And again, one of the many problems in U.S. politics is electoral college and gerrymandering and first past the post and all that kind of stuff where, yeah, my vote in Maryland for governor will count more than my vote for almost anything when I lived in New York or when I lived in Indiana, because there's some more competitive races. And part of why I wanted to do canvassing the way that I did in 2018 is that I was able to do support and canvassing via texting and things like that for races that were really competitive. And put my time there working with People's Action. People's Action is still active. I've not lined up, I have brain and I have time with there are people's action campaigns that I can do. And there's a couple weeks left. Maybe I can still do some of that. Almost 1 week of that will be difficult because I will be traveling. Maybe when I get in on Wednesday to the con, if I have energy, but probably not. Why would I ask myself to do that? It's very silly. Because I also I don't want to do these on days when I'm like really upset or don't have any energy, because then I'm not going to be able to do a good job of being persuasive in the texts when I need to be. Because my experience doing canvassing with People's Action in 2018 and 2020 was that 85 to 90% of that work is just like basically data entry. It is unsubscribing the people who respond with the unsubscribe request to the initial blast. Another 10% is basically find the voting information to share with the person so that they have the information they need. And then less than 5% of the work is actual persuasion work. And in that time, I think I maybe actually persuaded 2 voters, maybe, out of probably 15 or so hours of volunteering. I felt good about those. And then I had another handful of conversations with somebody who I wasn't necessarily changing their vote, but I was giving them a lot of information. And I felt great about those conversations. And part of it, in addition to like wanting to contribute and help win some races that are difficult, is the satisfaction or the peace of mind of knowing that I did something. Like feeling like there's too many bad things and feeling powerless, and then I do a thing and I know that I contributed. I know that I put effort into try to make it better, and that meant a lot to me. So the other topic that I had was about asking questions and sharing authority in TTRPGs. So this is, for me, 2 related topics. A lot of this comes from Powered by the Apocalypse role-playing games, specifically Apocalypse World and the games that are really directly influenced by Apocalypse World. And so that will include Forged in the Dark games, because Forged in the Dark, you can frame Forged in the Dark as a Powered by the Apocalypse game. It's just Powered by the Apocalypse in different ways than something that Monster of the Week is, because it uses a different dice main like resolution system, but it is still play to find out what action, how it happens. It is still fiction forward. It is still fail forward. It is still, be a fan of the characters, be a fan of the players, address the characters, a lot of that kind of stuff. So in that design style, as I saw from actual play, invites and encourages the GM to do a couple of things. One, let yourself be curious and ask questions about characters and the world state. So that might look like, somebody makes a character and like, okay, you're playing. We'll use Blaze in the Dark because I'm running a Blaze in the Dark game and it's a system that's very broadly known. Okay, cool. You're playing a cutter. That's like the fighty type. So who trained you? Like, who trained your character? Where did you learn to fight? Oh, well, I learned to fight like just getting, beat up as a kid, and then like getting tougher. And then did you have a mentor? And basically taking a player's initial notes on their character and just having a conversation about it is one way of asking questions. Because what I found that will do is it will encourage a player to keep thinking about their character and continue to develop them a little bit, even before we get into scene work. We get into scene play. Character creation is play. It's just a different type of play. And for me, the asking questions dialogue aspect is a great way to bridge between like the session 0 and character creation type of play into scene play, because we're doing work of storytelling, but we're doing more pre-production or foundational work. We're investigating motivation. We're filling out characters' backstory. We might be like casting additional characters. Like, did you have like if they had said, oh, well, I was a noble, so my first fighting teacher was the house's master at arms who taught me to fence. And I go, oh, okay, well, like, are you still in touch with them? Because your character is a noble, but like isn't doing noble stuff anymore, or maybe their family got killed, or their house got shattered. Are you still in touch with that man at arms? Like, are they now your bodyguard, or are they now like working as an enforcer for some gang? Like, taking little bits of possibility and teasing them out to see if there's something we want to add into or fold back into the story. Because then we can do this, and that gives me NPCs to work with. Like, oh, okay, cool. And your teacher used to be a master at arms for the noble house, and so I can think about, what did that master of arms think about the house's downfall? Why didn't they die if like the parents were assassinated? Like, okay, why didn't they die in this situation? Were they there? Were they not there? How do they feel about it? Because I can then take some of the shared material with that character's background, and I can use it to enrich and detail the NPCs. Yeah. I have not used a lot of character generation tables. I think they can be a great tool. I am the type of person who just having a billion ideas a minute is not a problem, but everybody's brains work differently. And another thing that character tables can do really well is they can tell a player, the range of possibilities in this space includes these things. So you could be a bounty hunter. You could be a forest ranger. You could be a war medic. A bunch of different possibilities. In the books, yeah, springboards are limiters. Hi, the kids are asleep. A good like random table or table of options will also basically establish world building. Like, tables are setting is something that I think either Grant Howard or Christopher Taylor, the two co-designers of Spire and Heart, either they said or someone said about them, because those games, they have a good bit of setting material written into them, and a lot of it is just put into random tables because they like random tables. And so I have a little bit of that work that I put into The Only Logical Solution is Hijinks, though as a one-page game, it's like that's very, very, very constrained, and I just didn't have a lot of time, like space. So the setting establishment there is mostly, yes, this setting is as you might expect if you are familiar with Star Trek already. So the other big use of asking questions is during play. So we're already into scene work. That same Cutter character is in the middle of a job with the other characters and is squaring off against like some gang's group of toughs. And when the player describes how they fight, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to slam one of them into a wall, and I'm going to like grab another one's weapon from them, and now I have two weapons, and I'm going to XYZ kind of thing. Something I can do when somebody is describing a thing that they can do is I ask, like, oh, okay, have you done this kind of thing before? Or do you think, is this representative of your character's like fighting style? And a lot of it just comes from my curiosity as a participant in the storytelling. In those moments, I am an audience member, and I have the benefit of access to this other storyteller. So when there's something that piques my interest, I feel empowered to take a moment to ask them to elaborate, or to kind of like show off a bit, to go, okay, well, you gave me something and I'm excited about it, so I want to hear more. I want to point the spotlight back at you, or really focus multiple spotlights on you so that we can take this thing that I already think is cool and you can do even more with it, which is fun because it will let me showcase and highlight players and their ideas and the ideas that they have for their characters. Also, in asking questions, I can encourage players to continue to develop their characters. I can identify when actions they are taking are meant to be representative of perspective or experience or point of view or worldview or something, and when an action might be not representative but still within a range of what a character can do. Where I ask, like, oh, is this how your character does magic? And you say, oh, well, normally I do X. Or I might ask, how does your character do magic? Or what does it look like when you do X? So some of those are just asking for clarification, or again, giving a player a little bit of time and spotlight to detail, to add texture, to kind of stunt a little bit. But it can also let me do world building, where I can go, okay, this action is in this context. It relates to this aspect of your background or of your training or something. And now I know what I should take from it. You know, if I'm writing a novel and I have a character who is a fighter type, if in the first fight scene that I have them in, they are not able to communicate what their fighting style is because circumstances are so constrained, I may be robbing myself of an opportunity to establish details most clearly compared to if I set that scene up so that I could say, here's this person, here's how they fight, and here's how much you should think that they are a threat in XYZ martial kinds of situations. Similarly, if I have a social character, if I have a techie kind of character, introducing a character, especially in a story where you have like action adventure-y kinds of stuff, or you have characters that are meant to be really at the top of their game, introducing them in their element so that they can shine can be really good. Especially like if I'm running D&D and we're doing a fairly traditional game of like heroic adventure, epic fantasy, if the very first fight that I give them doesn't let them feel cool, that better be because we all agreed that every fight is going to be really dangerous in this world. And even so, a fight can be really dangerous and I can let those characters feel really cool. So something I've been thinking about as I kind of reorient my brain to include the possibility of GMing 5e in a much bigger way than I have previously, because I've run a couple of one-shots. And I played in a, probably a year-plus long campaign where we played every other week or so. And it was a lot of fun. D&D, so many of the expectations of D&D are focused on that action adventure fantasy. And here I mean not just the fantasy genre, but that ability to see yourself or to live out the excitement, the idea of being this particular type of hero. A lot of the books that I've written have been action adventure. So it's not too much of a shift into that space. The bigger shifts are things like disengage rules and attacks of opportunity, and this is how a cone works, and you have a 30-foot move, and we have a tactical board, and here's a challenge rating, and this zombie queen has a multi-attack. Just the way that the mechanics express themselves in D&D are so different than in the games I mostly play, the Powered by the Apocalypse and Forged in the Dark games. And I played a lot of D&D. I played 2nd edition D&D, I played 3rd edition, I played 3.5, I played Pathfinder, I played some 4e, and I've already played some 5e. I've played a lot of D&D. But the general expectations and flow of most D&D games are still very different from the flow of a what folks would call a story game or an indie game or PBTA or Forged in the Dark, even if you're playing in the same or a similar genre. A game like Dungeon World was meant to feel kind of like an OS, like Dungeon World is arguably an OSR game, old school Renaissance. It's arguably, or you could certainly use it to play a game that feels like D&D felt like to a lot of people playing in the 70s and 80s. But Dungeon World says draw maps but leave blank spaces. It says give everybody a name. There are core elements of playing Dungeon World that are not intrinsic, nor are they necessarily especially common in D&D 5e. Yeah, and I think part of, like, because I am who I am drawn to games where there is more shared narrative authority and there is more open space to improvise into. And I know that that is not, it's not the way all games should be. It's the way that it is a way of designing games and playing games that especially works for me. And what I've been working on is how do I run the kinds of games I like most in a way that then will still be fun and exciting to people who come to the game and are not necessarily ideally served by it, but can still have fun if everybody is aware and does some work to meet one another halfway. Like, okay, how can we have enough detail so that someone who is used to more detail or who needs certain types of detail to be able to buy in or to feel as comfortable participating so that they can have fun. And some of it is just playing different games that are within the range of what I'm cool with, so that I can then also play with people whose their like center of game gravity is different than mine. Where it's like, oh, okay, I can enjoy D&D. I just approach it for different, I look for different things from it than I do from when I play Blades in the Dark. And that lets me enjoy different games that have different vibes and are fulfilling in different ways. And that's really fun because it means I'm not always just having one type of fun all the time. You know, there is great joy in, okay, I know just how I'm going to move so that I'm flanking this enemy, and I know my abilities so I can do this thing and this thing. And then I roll a crit and I do lots of damage and I like kill the enemy, and everybody cheers and we feel good about it. That's fun. It is, that I like other types of role playing maybe more does not make that thing I described not fun. It's still fun. I still like that. It's very cool. What I found that I enjoy the most in a game like D&D is when I am able to paint outside the lines a little bit, but not so much that we're throwing the book away. So in a 5e game that I'm playing with some friends that's not recorded, not streamed, it's just an online home game. I'm playing a monk, a non-Asian flavored, like non-Asian themed monk, this person is a martial artist. They punch things good. We came across a pair of flying monster type things that had something, they were carrying something between them. And my character had previously seen those flying creature things as like scavengers. And so one of the characters in the group is a centaur, and these flying monster things were like 10, 15 feet in the air. And so I say, okay, what I want to do is I'm going to run, I'm going to jump and pole vault off of the back of the centaur character so I can spring up using my like monk athleticism. And then I'm going to axe kick, to basically flip forward and bring my heel down on this flying creature. And I'm going to use a special ability that I have that will move them 15 feet. And I want to move them 15 feet straight down into the ground. And so I did the move. The GM bent the rules a bit. I didn't have to do like an extra acrobat. I did one acrobatics check, I think. And then I did my attack. And I did some damage. I knocked them into the ground, and the falling damage from being knocked 15 feet down is what killed them. And I felt great about that. And that was doing a thing that felt interesting to me in the story, making it fit within the rules, and then getting a fun outcome. And that's great. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to go for when I'm running D&D, whether that is for a paid game or if I'm going to like run a D&D game for Speculate or somewhere else, because as a fellow actual play like creator said when I was chatting with some folks a couple months ago now, if you want to be able to reach the largest audience, you probably, as an actual play creator, you probably need to have, or this person said you need to, and I think they're probably mostly right. You need to be playing Dungeons and Dragons at least some of the time, because there are people, a lot of people, because D&D is so the elephant in the room. It's 70 something percent of the market and 70% of the player base. There may be glitch. I may need to drop my repeating audio. Well, that's not good. I have gotten 21 dropped frames, but that's still 0%. So hopefully that is a isolated problem. The kind of D&D that I want to run uses some of the structures of the rules, but is fluid and flexible enough that we can stretch the rules to do things that we're interested in without it then becoming frustrating to people who like the clarity that the structure and the rules provide, so that we can play jazz a little bit with the game, but not leave behind the people in the band who are keeping 4/4 time, if I can mix some music metaphors. So that's what I'm going to be, that's what I want to go for. In something like Eberron Morning's Shadow, I wanted to like bring my own storytelling aesthetic to D&D. Maybe I will get to run that as a Speculate thing. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just do something else with D&D. But it has been fun to think about how to have the kind of fun that will still make me excited inside this game space that I have often not been as keen on. And actually, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add a space to this, because now that O in Turbo Tango is not cut off, because I just noticed that. Okay. Now I feel better. But yeah, there's a Dragonlance book coming in November, I think, which is supposed to be like it's like the War of the Dragons campaign. I read the crap out of the Dragonlance books when I was like 12 or 13 and 14. Love those a lot. I have some experience with like military history stuff through friends like, a lot of SCA friends like Lothar and other folks. And dragons are really fun. So maybe I'll get that book. Maybe I'll run it for start playing, or maybe I'll just, check it out. I like Spelljammer. I showed off the Spelljammer stuff earlier. I might get to do Light of Xerxes for that, make it as pulpy as I can. Next year we've got Planescape. If Planescape is another 3-book set like this, I share some folks' worries, because I think it may be really difficult to get across enough information about all the stuff that makes Planescape cool in 3 64-page books. And I think the Light of Xerxes adventure leaves some things to be wanted. I think there's a generous read of Light of Xerxes that it is intentionally railroady and too linear, and has some places where I go, wait, what's the motivation here? Because it is trying to emulate a particular retro science fiction kind of schlockiness. But I assert that you can do neopulp schlockiness where the story can make sense and still be ridiculous. And the things that are ridiculous are not stuff that will come across as, oh, well, we don't like, just keep everything moving so you don't think about stuff too much. But you keep things moving and it all works along the way, where you have both emotional resonance and dramatic resonance, where there is a sense of emotional realism, and the suspension of disbelief in the world state is not violated extensively in the way that I think some folks who had more negative reactions to the Light of Xerxes adventure path or adventure book. It's not a path, it's one book. So I want to set my standards high for wacky space pulp and do the best possible wacky space pulp that I can. So that is that. It is almost 4. I think I'm going to wrap up, which means I'm going to pull up another Twitch page so I can see who is streaming in case there are friends who are streaming that I could send some love to. Yes, it looks like there are, in fact, such folks. So that is great. I want to say boom, 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 boom. So next Friday on the 21st, you can see me as the Dancing Master, aka DM, aka GM, for Valoward, which is a Court of Blades campaign. Court of Blades is a Forged in the Dark game. Valoward is a Renaissance fantasy campaign where the players are all a coterie of retainers to like a great, like one of the big 6 houses in this fantasy Caribbean country of Valoward, which is like a city-state. And so you get intrigue and swashbuckling and adventuring and, chasing people over rooftops and cool magic rituals and ancient societies that aren't in fact gone, but are a way of talking about history and the layering of history and cool stuff like that, because all the players, in a way that makes me very excited, are bringing their own creative interests into the project and putting them into the work. And so we're getting to combine all of the stuff that we're all excited about in that, which makes me very happy. And you can watch previous stuff from Valoward. Eleron, sorry. Nope, that's wrong. That's Arvam Eleron. Let me just type the Arvan Eleron word first and then add everything else. Okay, so at Greg's YouTube, you can find a Speculate playlist with all of the games that we've done. So Case of the Cindered Seal and Blades of the Dark, you can see Rebel Crown, you can see then the 2 active series, Fractal Spire, which is a Girl by Moonlight game, and Valoward, which is the Court of Blades game. And so I'm GMing the Valoward game, and Brandon is GMing Fractal Spire. So those are all really cool. If you like what I have to say about role-playing games, I would love it if you could go and check one of those out and see if that's a series that you want to get into. We will be broadcasting Valoward live next Friday on twitch.tv/ArvanEleron. And then I believe that Sunday will be when we're going to be broadcasting Girl by Moonlight Fractal Spire. We had originally announced that it was going to be this Sunday, but we had to change our plans. And yeah, so that is all of those things. And now I am going to say, let's go and raid Katie. Oh no, did Katie stop streaming? Did I catch Katie just at the end? No, it's just not showing up. That's very strange. Okay. Katie might be like finishing, but let's go and say hi.